Again, everybody. Okay, welcome everybody. So some of us have been with SBCAN and with the League and several other organizations. We've been working quite hard and quite collaboratively on a lot of housing issues that are coming into the forefront of both locally and nationally attention. Housing is suddenly and forcibly a major political issue in this country. And we've had the episodes that most of you probably know something about that have really dramatized them, such as the mass eviction threat in Isla Vista, but also most immediate issue where positive things can be happening is on the city of Santa Barbara level. The city council unanimously established what they now call the Hope Fund for supporting affordable housing. They passed that. They actually appropriated a couple of $1 million out of a budget surplus to start that up. It's a fund that, but the definition of the nature of that entity remained for the staff to clarify and present an ordinance. And one of the things that we want to educate people about is the problems around that particular matter. That is that the staff's attempt to define the fund is not satisfactory to any of us or to the members of the council who have chimed in on it. And there's things coming up where we all as citizen activists engaged in this issue need to be attentive to in shaping that. But then the second part of that story is the need to create a permanent funding source for this fund. The Housing Authority under Rob Frederick's leadership has been taking the lead in proposing a ballot initiative, which will be required because this is a new tax measure or tax increase measure that is being proposed, has to have a vote of the people. And I want to have Rob and Diane Black, both of them can have things to say about this whole situation. So maybe give Rob the chance to talk about the initiative more than the Hope Fund per se. So Diane, what can you give us about that story?
You want me to talk a little bit about the Hope Fund?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, the League of Women Voters has been involved in kind of the establishment of this fund from kind of its inception. We testified before the City Council on December 2nd, supporting the set aside of general fund surplus for several purposes: to increase the supply of affordable housing for low to moderate income residences, to increase housing security, especially for renters, and to provide affordable housing closer to jobs for more sustainable communities. And I spent a minute just talking about the inception of the fund because I think it's really important to realize what this started off to be, because it's really gotten quite far afield from that, from at least the League's perspective, and I think from the Housing Authority's perspective as well. So Linda and Lisa and I, on behalf of the League, talked to staff about a number of housing issues and other issues, probably in January or February. And the community development director let us know that this Hope Fund was going to be coming forward in the relatively near future. And we were pretty disappointed in the proposal as it came forward, and disappointed in the fact that there was really no attempt to get any public feedback or input into it before coming to the council with a fully formed ordinance. So we commented on that first Hope proposal that went to the city in a March 6th letter. And basically we included the same emphasis. We wanted the money to go to the creation of very low to moderate income housing. We wanted the money to go to public and nonprofit agencies, not for-profit developers, not for above moderate income units, and not with shortened affordability periods. And then we talked about in our letter the fact that the proposed ordinance had the community development department director making determinations about where those funds will go with no oversight by city council. And we thought that was highly inappropriate. And so we suggested that there be a public, transparent process. And then we were pretty disappointed that the city was proposing to have a 10% administrative cost burden on the fund, which accounts, there's 2.5-ish dollars in that fund. That's $250,000 to administer 2.5 million. Staff, that's a very, very highly paid 1 FTE of staff people. And it just doesn't seem like that's warranted for administration of the fund. So the city council sent the HOPE fund issue to the ordinance committee, and they asked that the staff bring it to the ordinance committee in a workshop format. And really what they did was they pretty much submitted the same staff report or the same components to the ordinance committee. And we commented on that as well in a May 8th letter. Again, the same points. Wanted the funds to be for nonprofits and the housing authority, not for for-profit developers, which was still included in the proposal. We wanted the housing to be 100% income restricted at the below 120 AMI or the moderate level, with limited availability and flexibility for up to 160% of AMI, recognizing that the housing authority does serve some constituents in that band as well. 90-year affordability covenant, no sliding scale of affordability, which I still can't quite figure out why this staff proposed that. And then we wanted to make sure there was a local preference for city residents or those employed in this city. Again, we pointed out the disbursement of funds should be through a public process. That didn't change at all. I think the only change from the original staff report to the council and the staff report to the ordinance committee was a proposal that after the fact, the community development director would submit a report to the city council, which just doesn't seem like oversight to us. Again, we asked that they not have an administrative cost burden on this fund, and suggested that they look into some sort of an impact fee on commercial development, hotel development. And, in a bit of a fit of frustration, we also said, these issues have been raised several times now and nothing's changing. So what's the process to get things to change? To their credit, I think the ordinance committee was very frustrated as well and did not feel like what happened on May 9th was actually a public workshop. It wasn't. It was a public hearing with people getting a couple minutes to speak. And so they said they want a real public workshop. So that's supposed to happen on June 28th. It's kind of interesting. Maybe Rob knows more about this, but as far as I can tell, Rob and I are the only ones that are invited to participate in the public workshop, aside from a list of staff people who also got the invite. So that's kind of odd to me that we would be the only ones. If that's how it is to be, I think both of us will do the best we can to try and represent people's concerns and interests. And so if I've left something out that's really important to this group, I'd really like to hear about it, and we'll consider that.
Diane, do you have any diagnosis of this staff behavior?
I oversaw a department that was highly political. Jeannie knows that. I mean, it was, it was tough, but I just think the staff is kind of tone deaf. They're not understanding what the city council intended, even though I think it was pretty clear when the funds were set aside. They're certainly not listening to public comment, and I don't really know why. And I think a number of people are kind of suspicious. Like, is there something out there that somebody wants funded with these dollars, and that's why they keep proposing to have the funds so broad? So I don't really know. I'm hoping that we can set it on what we think is what the league thinks is the proper course. But yeah, I really don't get it. I've just never seen this. I can tell you, if I had done this at the Board of Supervisors, I probably would have been fired. So I'm just kind of baffled by what's been going on.
So I want to add one historical point that's, I think, quite important, which is historically there was a stream of funding for the Housing Authority and
Absolutely.
other nonprofits coming out of redevelopment. That was abolished under Jerry Brown's second term as governor, and not replaced. So really, the fundamental point here is to restore something that was absolutely necessary. I think Rob would agree, for the maintenance and really quality of the nonprofit affordable housing efforts in this community, which we are all very proud of. So Rob, why don't you pick this up? What else would you, what would you add to that story? And also the initiative that you're part of the effort to bring into being.
Yeah, so first off, I just want to say what Diane said. Everything she said is right on. And the Housing Authority in our comment letters and public comments were perfectly aligned with her comments here today and in the league's letters. It's difficult for the Housing Authority coming out so strong, because we've gotten pushback from the city, who we view as our partners, right? They formed the Housing Authority back in 1969, and they've given us tremendous amount of funding, even recently for developments. The problem is we need more, and we need to do it in the right way. So when the trust fund was created and the funds allocated by city council, we heard clearly from the majority of council members that this is to go towards affordable housing purposes for the community members, because people are suffering out in the community right now, not having the affordable housing they need. And then city staff didn't bother to consult with us, and they come back, as Diane said, with these crazy ideas. And I don't know any other way to couch it. And it's not a personal attack to the staff. I don't know where these came from, but some of them are outright not workable. They had some reduced restrictions, affordability covenants to 5 and 10 years. That makes no sense whatsoever. So my predecessor, my mentor, Rob Pearson, always told me, social justice is not a spectator sport. You got to get your glove and get in the game. And so if something's going too far off the tracks, when it concerns our wheelhouse of providing affordable housing, I feel we have a duty to speak up, even if our friends at the city don't agree. And we can be congenial and collegial about it, but we have to point out where what they were presenting was just not right. And if they just kept what's been in place under the policies under the old RDA rules, the redevelopment agency rules for taking the redevelopment agency funds and obligating those, expending those funds in the manner that's been set through the Affordable Housing Policies and Procedures handbook, that there's no need to come up with all these other crazy programs. There's no need to have an administrative fee because it's already there. It's the programs are set. There's not a lot of additional work, especially when we're talking about this initial tranche of funds of just $2.8 million, right? Just under 3 million. And I think the city's viewing us in terms of, why are you fighting this so hard when it's only that amount of money? And the reason is because they're proposing all of these policy changes as well that would have lasting impact if we got another ongoing local source of funding. And we don't need all of these changes to adequately utilize the funds. We have systems in place, we have programs. The housing authority alone could use those funds, all of that $2.8 million. I know other nonprofits, Habitat, could easily take some of those funds and put them to good work, good use under the existing framework of policies that have been set by a lot of folks in the past that are a lot brighter than me. So
let me just interject that, to not forget that the council members, the electeds, are on the same wavelength that you are, most, if not all of them, almost all of them. And that's part of what's so striking about the staff behavior on this.
Yeah, it is, and when they came back to ordinance committee and with the same issues, the same framework that they presented at city council, they didn't listen to them, obviously. And they were just ignoring the direction they were given. And I agree. I don't see how, if I had done that, I would be expecting to pack my bags and head out of town.
It was embarrassing. Well,
Yeah.
Well, not to be so dark about it, this fund is a great opportunity, right? This is a breakthrough in the possibilities for developing the kind of housing that we need. And that to me is how I've been viewing it. So this staff behavior, hopefully it's a dark blip on an otherwise promising situation. And so one more point about this, but that's the workshop on June 28th.
Yes.
What do you understand that's supposed to be now?
Well, just what Diane said is that out of the 14 or so on the invite list, only 2 people from outside of city staff and electeds were included. That was myself and Diane, representing the housing authority and representing the league. Nobody else. And there's a lot of other good minds out there that should be at the table and putting forth what they think. It's not just the Rob and Diane show. It should be others involved. So I emailed that directly. I don't know if we'll get some traction on it. What I heard again was, oh, well, it's a Brown Act thing because it's a Brown Acted meeting. You know what? You can still have it as a Brown Act meeting, call the meeting to order, do public comment, do all the stuff that's required in a Brown Act meeting and still have a workshop and have other people invited. So
would you recommend that others who would like to be there, who would they communicate with to ask if we can be at the table?
I would outreach to Elias, the community development director.
Right.
To
He's
request
convening.
input.
He's convening this meeting. Is that it?
Yes. He,
Okay.
he for on behalf of the ordinance committee is the
Right.
one that's organizing it. So
Rob, don't you think maybe, I don't know, I haven't found Eli to be exceptionally receptive.
right.
So it might be that people reach out to the ordinance committee members too.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that is, who are the 3 council members on that committee?
You have Kristen Snedden, Mike
Thank you.
Gordon, and Oscar Gutierrez.
Okay. And the chair is Oscar, I
The
believe.
chair is Oscar. Yes.
All right. So that's that piece. Now, there's this one-time appropriation of close to 3 million. And by the way, there's one feature that hasn't been mentioned. $250,000, interestingly enough, appropriated to provide subsidy or a right to counsel for tenants having difficulty like eviction, was built into this, which to me was a big breakthrough in itself.
Yeah.
And that has to be defined as well, how that's going to be administered. But so Rob, you have had this, you've taken a lot of leadership in proposing a permanent way to fund this, to provide revenue for this fund. Why don't you tell us what the plans are, or what you're hoping for there?
Yeah. Well, you know, for the last few for let's just say since housing elements have been around, we have failed at meeting our regional housing needs allocation numbers for low-income households, moderate income households. And when the city was ramping up their housing element update, we're like, well, how do we, light bulb, how do we go ahead and ramp up our production to meet those numbers? And part of that is funding, is a local source of funding is needed to increase opportunities and production for rental housing and homeownership housing. And we don't want the housing element just to be ongoing lip service. We want something behind it. So we were pushing at, when they were just first drafting and coming to the Planning Commission and the City Council on their initial plans, and we were there at the table. So was Diane and others, really saying in order for us to be successful, we need an ongoing local source of funding that we can leverage with other funding sources to build new affordable housing. We have such a dearth of housing available across the spectrum that people are being crushed, and the people who are absolutely being crushed are our low-income families. Their cost burden is by far the greatest, dollar for dollar. So we really need to focus on that. And you mentioned at the beginning of the meeting here today, Dick, the redevelopment agency. And when that went away in 2012, when redevelopment agencies statewide were abolished, that took away a local source of funding that provided between $4 and $5 million a year to affordable housing. Yes, the Housing Authority was a recipient of those funds. When we'd have a development, we'd go to community development and ask for loans, that they give us those monies on a residual receipts basis. It helped us make up the gap, helped us purchase property to tie it up instead of it going to market. And we were very successful. And when you look at the 10 years prior to the dissolution of redevelopment agencies and compare that to the last 10 years since the dissolution, we have underproduced by about 50% the number of units we produced when RDA in its last 10 years was around providing funding. So that's a good case right there for how do we get that. So you look at, well, there are funding sources locally that can be put forth. Well, the city could allocate some funds if there's a general fund surplus, which they did with establishing the Hope Fund, but that's not guaranteed year to year. You know, they're projecting a deficit next year. So how do we get a guaranteed ongoing source of funding? That would have to be an increase in either a bond measure, a real estate transfer tax, or a sales tax, or a transient occupancy tax. And I look at all of those together, and I'm looking at what would be the easiest path forward, not specifically easy. Anything we choose to do will be hard, any one of those options. But in looking at them together, I'm looking at that it's the transient occupancy tax, that there's a clear nexus where a tourism economy in Santa Barbara, where it's the hotel workers need affordable housing, all the service workers in the city, your restaurant workers, your retail clerks, all of them need affordable housing, and all of that's driven by tourism. So to me, it makes sense to tie an increase to the transient occupancy tax to dedicate that increase to affordable housing. Have it still come into the city, but it goes into that fund that would then, like we do now, if I have a development, that opportunity, either purchase a piece of land to tie up, to go through entitlements, or even purchasing a market rate existing development and turning that into affordable deed restricted housing with long-term deed restrictions, we could access those funds. Habitat could access those funds. People self-help housing could access those funds. Community Housing Corporation, the list goes on. It's not just the housing authority. So my idea looking at it, and again, don't look at me, I'm not an expert in any of this. I know nothing. And maybe that's why I'm pushing. Maybe that's a good thing that I'm leading it, because I know nothing. I'm not scared of it because I know nothing. So I'm pushing forward with that. I've already issued an RFP for consultants on ballot measures to help us do the polling, do everything, help us meet everything that's required to get a measure on the ballot, to help us build a coalition of groups like SBCAN, like other housers, so that we get everybody behind this, understanding what we're trying to do, that we have correct messaging. On a transient occupancy tax, we have the hoteliers who will be clearly against it. I don't think there's any way we could get them to be positive, like, yay, move forward with it. But, you know, perhaps there's a way we can get them to take a neutral position, and I'm not even sure on that. I'm not looking at it through rose-colored glasses saying, yeah, we're going to get their support or even neutrality. We'll probably get pushback on it. And that's why I need really to build that coalition of like-minded people, and even people who aren't currently like-minded, that we can meet with groups and explain what's needed and present. I just did a one-page draft that I'll send you, Dick, and you could send it to the community after I have some of my commissioners who are on look at it and review it for me. It's kind of like a case statement of why this is needed in plain terms, so that it's just a one-pager, but I think it has the information that's needed that we can help begin get the word out. So the first step is we're going to be selecting through the proposals that we receive a consultant either an individual or firm that does these. We reached out to a few of these folks are established firms that have done successful statewide ballots that are interested. So I'm looking forward to having that help. And when we get that help, they'll help us with the messaging, help us with the polling to figure out what is the right. Maybe it's not TOT. Maybe I'm way off base, but what will the community have as an appetite for helping solve this seemingly in I don't know the right word, you know, that insolvable problem of affordable housing. And so I'm really hopeful on that on a first step. And I'm thinking anywhere between 2 and 3% increase in the transient occupancy tax. Right now it's 12%. And 2 of the 12% goes towards creeks and clean water. That will stay out of that 12%. But the increase, if we can go up to 3, I believe there will be enough funds in there that can go towards capital, affordable housing, and also possibly to some services that now the city is paying out of general fund and other sources that they wouldn't have to pay. But it has to be directly related to obtaining and retaining residents affordable housing for low income. And that includes folks who are currently homeless on the street that need housing. Those are the folks that desperately need the services and ongoing services once they're housed, right? I mean, Alex knows better than I, or the same as me, that the challenges we have, even as housers, the end user housers of the challenges we have with folks that have moved from homelessness and they just have special needs, mental health issues that they need help to help, balance their lives and help them live successfully in their home. We don't want to create a revolving door. So that's part of my thinking behind it.
Oh, that's very good. So,
Yeah.
So the one thing to point out, which you've made this point before, the current 12% TOT is lower than in other communities. So the 15% is actually a pretty common level of taxation for this hotel type tax. And one of the beauties of it politically as a tax on the ballot is this is a tax the voters won't have to pay. So yes, the hotel industry may not like it, but and it may even be some hotel people who will be smart enough or benevolent enough, or to recognize that they should not block this. They should not try to stop it in the interest of the community and their own workers. I should add that we have been building a coalition that includes several unions, United Food and Commercial Workers Union, SEIU locals, and Domestic Workers Union, as well as many of the organizations in town, in addition to the ones here in this room, in this space, groups like Planned Parenthood and the religious community represented around this table. It's called an economic justice table. And that group is very enthusiastic about being part of the campaign that would be needed to gather the signatures and to persuade the community to vote for this. The council could put this tax on the ballot, but my understanding is then there'd have to be a 2/3 popular vote for the tax.
Right.
A grassroots initiative signature campaign would only require majority support.
Yep, simple majority.
Yeah, and it may well be that getting the signatures is a way to educate people and organize them. So a lot of the stuff is, coming into place. That's why we wanted to have this roundtable, bring this news, because everyone said, what can we do? What can we do? Here's something very concrete that is a path to some housing solutions, at least for the city. We're thinking that if this fund can be established in the city with this kind of funding, the county will want to emulate the same kind of process, and we want to work for that. And I think there's a national movement now at the local level all over the country, not wait for the federal government to fund affordable housing anymore. That almost seems like a lost cause, but communities are able to find a way to do it. The state legislature is considering measures, including our own Senator Limon has a measure on the floor for a similar kind of operation. So I always look for the hope, and Hope Fund is a hope. So any other points on this? And we wanted people to know about this. It's still below the radar. The media have not been brought into awareness of this campaign. But I think once this consultant is on board, we're going to have a path to make this campaign happen. For the fall of 2024 is that election.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's not. Yeah. So thank you. Any questions to Rob or Diane about the situation in the city, the Hope Fund, and so forth? Anybody have any points? You could always put questions on the chat, and we'll try to monitor that. I don't know if there are any right now.
And can I just say, while people are maybe coming up with questions or something, that I really do appreciate the coalition building work, Dick, and we're going to want other folks in the communities to step up and lead this as well, because at a certain point when it's put on the ballot, I have to step back as a public agency. And I also just honest confession time, I feel with this kind of stuff, I feel really naked out in the world. Pushing forward on this, it's not how I'm used to doing something. Back in the day, we kept our head down and just did good work, right? And just did housing authority work, and we have a good reputation. But we're at such a point, like a precipice right now, that if we don't push for this, I think we're going to miss an opportunity of helping those in our community now that really need the help.
Right. All right. So I don't see any urgent questions coming to the fore right now on this, and I think there's a whole other big topic, and we're probably overloading people with this, but that was really what we wanted to do, is make you aware that things are happening that I think are very significant. I think you probably agree, but there are also a lot of peril and a lot of dark sides to what is going on. So here's the situation on the county level. I'll try to summarize the background of it. This housing complex in Isla Vista, which has been one of the few substantial housing complexes on the South Coast that continue to have affordable rents. Something like 240 apartments in this complex was bought by a firm in Chicago called Core Spaces. That firm almost immediately on taking over posted notices of termination on the doors of all the apartments in this building on the grounds that they were going to do major renovations and people had to be evicted. And you may know that under just cause provisions, both local and state, I think I'm right in this, renovation's one of the few ways that you can kick out tenants legally. So that's the claim. The county already had an ordinance to cover this sort of relocation that provides 3 months of rent, which is about $7,000, as relocation allowances for people facing eviction in the event of major renovations or of this sort. But the problem with that is where are these people supposed to relocate? This is not simply a student apartment complex, even though it's in Isla Vista. And Alex may be able to, call him in a minute, tell us more about the population in this, of the tenants in this, but they include families, numbers of Latino families, includes people on Section 8 vouchers, includes people on emergency homeless vouchers. A lot of lower income people are living there. There's no place these people can move. I think that's a flat statement of basically truth. The students are more flexible, likely, in the way they live. So, but there are a number of university employees living in the housing project who, in this complex, who I think would expect to want to live there permanently. So as soon as the tenants union of Santa Barbara quite brilliantly organized tenants from this complex to come and speak before the county board shortly after these notices were posted. And the stories people were telling in public comment obviously were profound for members of the county soups like Laura Capps and Dos Williams and Joan Hartman were all touched greatly and realized they had to take action. County had an emergency special meeting where they strengthened the local ordinance to try to do something to protect these tenants. What they did might be significant, but they're not enough. So I'm going to shut up now because Alex really knows the situation a lot better than I'm describing it. And he has been the legal aid lawyer, spending your life for several years dealing with people in all sorts of dire circumstances, tenants. And but this is, take it, Alex, if you're there.
Yeah. Hey, I think the end to that sentence is that this is unprecedented. We're working with a firm out of Northern California called Housing and Economic Rights Advocates that has agreed to represent a 70 unit plus core spaces tenants association, and we'll be talking to them this afternoon. I've been over there for 6 separate Saturdays to get to know your rights, to meet folks. Obviously, I represent people over there. There's at least 20 Section 8 voucher holders, many families, and at each of the meetings that we had on Saturdays, the Santa Barbara Tenants Union had an interpreter because easily 50% of the attendees were monolingual Spanish. And I think that Core Spaces more or less admitted this, that when they purchased the property, they were not aware of the demographics and the reality of perhaps what happened when UCSB did not have in-person classes for over a year and a half, and people have lived there who are not students. There's a significant student population, but it's become quite clear even to families who had sort of taken at face value the notices given and believed that they were going to move out, that there are not options. In my discussions with opposing counsel, they are scrambling on their side to try to coordinate landlords who can offer places for these people to live, because right now the only offer has been a 30 units that are essentially single room occupancies, SROs, which are meaningless for the large number of families and the Section 8 voucher holders and are no replacement for what we're losing. And I think zooming back from the tenants on the ground and pairing a little bit with what Rob was discussing earlier, we have naturally affordable housing here, 246 units that will be, if this goes through, flipped into essentially a luxury private dorm sold by the bed, where the tenancies will be turning over and not be price capped. I did a very quick spreadsheet on what they will stand to gain from that, and it's in roughly 100 million to 200 million difference in the extraction of rent if you keep price caps in place versus completely deregulating the rent. So the kind of structural problem here is that those units will never be units that these families will be allowed to return to. A mother with 4 children is not a student and will essentially be precluded from renting, and as will all other families who are not students in our communities. So it's threatening that naturally affordable housing, the structure of the Tenant Protection Act, which caps rent at currently 10%, between 5 and 10%, depending on the CPI adjustment per year. And we're losing an incredible number of units if we don't have anything change. I mean, just to give
13 hours.
The Affordable Housing Trust Fund its due, if you look at what happened in Berkeley when Core Spaces purchased a bunch of different properties, they had very strong tenant protections. Obviously, Berkeley is kind of the genesis for like the Birkenfeld v. City of Berkeley establishes rent control and eviction control in 1976. They have very strong protections, and Core Spaces comes in, and instead of this, what's happening in our community, they give $10 million to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund in Berkeley, and they permanently covenant 16 rent-controlled units, replacing the displaced rent-controlled units that they purchased. So there's some parallels that we look at in the kind of policies and housing trust funds that we can establish that I think from one end of like an eviction defense attorney, it just looks like me having a reason to sign off for the day. But from a kind of larger perspective, the things that that we are pushing for, and it's a similar thing to what Rob was saying, where we're taking our day hats off a little bit and fighting, because you can't be neutral here. Don't just protect the tenants here, it protects the affordable housing stock that is greatly at risk in this property. And we see just from a search on Zillow or real estate property listings, many of the multifamily properties that are naturally affordable are just by design targets for acquisition and renoviction in order to deregulate the rent. So the policy that I wrote a 2-page memo on what we're essentially calling a fair right to return, which is based essentially on the policies that have been in place in every rent capped or rent controlled jurisdiction that's ever had to deal with this problem. If you think about it, if you have $100 to $200 million equity gain you can make on a property like this, the cost of renovations is negligible. If you come in to purchase, you can essentially buy out the rent caps if you have the ability to do this. So it is, in one sense, a policy that allows the right to return, in another way of thinking, it is a way to make effective, naturally affordable rentals. And I think there's an example in San Pablo of that some of the attorneys I've worked with from ACE have explained. When you have an affordable housing trust fund and you have some of these protections, the negotiation becomes the county folks and the advocates for the tenants can say, there's this third way here. There's this affordable housing trust fund that can provide financing that can then go into a nonprofit or a public housing agency of some sort that can keep this in the community. But that only functions if you have the protections that that make it where the tenants cannot be essentially priced out. And I think the incentive is greater and greater the more units there are. If you have, like we have here, 246 units and a firm that's largely Blackstone and Goldman Sachs executives with $550 million worth of funding from Goldman and an endless supply of capital, it's very difficult to protect, even with some of the speed bumps that we've put in. All
right, so bring us focus in, if you will, on the county board and what they have tried to do, and what are we trying to get them to do, and what are the frustrations and possibilities there.
Yeah, so Dick mentioned it, that the tenants union mobilized about 60 tenants to tell their stories, and the county very quickly reacted, which was wonderful, providing a little bit of a buffer by copying the city of Santa Barbara's just cause ordinance, which essentially requires that permits actually have been pulled before an eviction can go through. It's a good faith ordinance. In a sense, it's a right to know. And we knew at the time that that's a slowdown to allow for more organization and to allow for us to push for what we want, which is the right to return. And I think the frustration is in part because these policies appear novel to Santa Barbara. We have not had rent control boards. We have not had rent control, so we've never had to deal with these issues. And I think we faced some early resistance and pushback from county council that you could not do a fair right to return if you kept the rent at the same amount. That's true. So I responded with a memo that explained that's an unconstitutional taking. You can't just freeze the rent for what could be a 5-year renovation project. So the frustration is that we're getting inconsistent feedback on the willingness to engage in this. And we know that there are many, many people involved in the county who have every desire to do what's to push for what's possible here. I think there's also some fear that what we're saying is we're trying to undo the core spaces project alone when the proposal is actually prospective. It's for all of us. So I think those are the two major concerns we've had, that it can't be retroactive, in a sense, like trying to put core on trial in the County Board of Supervisors, and it can't be something that's a taking. And I think that the novelty of it is something that actually is statewide, because now we have price caps and every jurisdiction is having to deal with this. And it's been all over. There's a group of 10 attorneys that I meet with once a month that are outside of Santa Monica, San Francisco, Berkeley, who are looking at this issue and saying, like, we have to think about this like it's been thought of in those jurisdictions, and in those areas it is not new. And it is essentially the draft language piece, just one piece of it that I proposed, is copy pasted from something that held up on appeal in Oakland.
So there's already been litigation and already some court favorability to the right of return exists. All right. So, and the county council knows this, or are they, I don't quite understand why they persist, if they are persisting in their objection.
Me either, but I think there's a way in which it's novel in that in Oakland there's a rent control board, and the rent control is implemented by Oakland, and this would be somewhat new in that you have the Tenant Protection Act from state law, and then a local rule where saying you have to come back, but the legal principles and the operation of it are exactly the same. I think there's some, I frankly assume there's some objection to it because it is an entryway to rent control.
Well, that's what they may think, but that's not a legitimate policy position. I mean, the point to me, the policy position that you've alluded to is a right of return is a way of deterring this kind of business model that Core Spaces has, which is you buy up a reasonably affordable existing housing that many different kinds of people are making use of, and you turn it into a high-end luxury dorm for a certain class of students, not even for the whole type of students that go to UCSB nowadays, would probably not. And you can get huge amount of rents out of that kind of change of those apartments into that kind of accommodation. It's a brilliant business plan in a troubled industry. It seems like a primary investment goal of these major global corporations or national corporations now. I mean, what is the situation in terms of direct lobbying for those of us around this table? What should we be doing right now to help bring about what you're talking about?
Well, maybe Nadia can share more of that, but we have talked to 4 of the 5 county supervisors directly about this, bringing the tenants as well. I was not present at the meeting with Supervisor Nelson yesterday, but I think just consistently pushing for this, because it is, this is not going to be the last. It is happening nonstop. One anecdote I can share is the resource guide handed out referenced United Way. I called United Way to ask what their capacity was to deal with this, and the person that answered the phone was being rent evicted. So I think it's impacting all of us across the board, and advocating with the electeds for a right to return, and like a reasonable right to return, and to look into this in good faith. It can make a huge impact.
Yeah, I think yeah, it helped. Like we've been showing up just at general public comment because it's not on the agenda or anything, and it was really helpful. I know Diane came and read a letter or some notes from the League of Women Voters supporting the tenants and asking for these policy changes, and I think that was helpful. They Laura Capps mentioned the league specifically. The tenants union, for better or worse, has a certain reputation around in public office spaces, and is not always, I guess, the most credible or the most diplomatic in some of its approaches. And so I think it helps to have these policies and these ideas and these concerns be voiced from several different voices. And if you share these concerns, to say that, because just because we're there showing up, they're not necessarily listening to us, and they're not necessarily listening to the tenants. I mean, I think they are listening and they're sympathetic, but I don't know that they're like trusting us as experts on the policy, that this is something that they can and should do. So yeah, just continuing that advocacy. And yeah, it's a little bit, there's just a lot else going on with the tenants union, and there's some things happening that I'm not totally aware of also with this effort. But we always need people to go door to door around the buildings to get the word out and make sure people are aware of what's going on. Morale is fluctuating, but generally is low, and perhaps getting lower among the tenants. A lot of people have left already who can, people have moved to Vegas, people have moved to New Mexico, and yeah, people are leaving. And but people need to hear that, we're there supporting them, that this is an option for them to stay, that it's not, they don't have to go yet. And especially, I mean, one clear thing we need is more people who speak Spanish or who are bilingual to help go door to door and help us with that advocacy. So if you know of people, or if you yourself are interested in something like that, you can let me or Alex know. Yeah, I don't know. We met with 4 out of the 5 supervisors. We haven't met with Steve Lavanino yet, but I think we will. And yeah, everyone has been pretty sympathetic. The one with Bob Nelson was kind of interesting, but he did say he wasn't going to try to stop whatever we were doing, which was good. He wasn't necessarily supportive, but he said he wouldn't like throw sand in the gears. And yeah, Joan was definitely supportive, but she also doesn't want to step on the toes of, Laura Cops, because this is her district. And then I think Doss and Laura were like definitely sympathetic and want to do something, but are not convinced that they can do what we're asking them because of what county council is saying. And that's really, yeah, so that's feels like where there's a bottleneck is just, telling them that they're sort of weighing the risk between doing something and getting the county sued. And I think we need to say, like, they're going to get sued no matter what. Honestly, like, Core Spaces has endless money to do whatever they want to do. So do they want to protect these tenants enough to risk that, and to protect Santa Barbara? I mean, to protect the community. Like, this goes so much bigger than just these tenants, although these tenants do also need to be protected. And yeah, it's just kind of that like wonky policy, legal, finagling to get it to where they're comfortable supporting it.
Part of I'm just comment emotionally, I feel this, that what is government for if it cannot protect people who are going to be thrown into the streets because a huge wealthy corporation wants to do that to them? I mean, what is
why do we why is there this feeling that we need to protect Core Spaces and the investment that Core Spaces has made, when they themselves have admitted that it was a bad investment? They thought that they'd be able to flip this building no problem. All the students would move out at the end of the year, and they've admitted that they were wrong. Half of the people are not students, they're families. They speak Spanish. They didn't even know that. And why are we worried about protecting a $90 million investment from a multi-billion-dollar corporation more than protecting the 1,000 tenants who have been displaced?
All right. I wonder, I don't know, Spencer, you're here. Spencer's a staff member for DAS. William, do you want to make any comment on what's being said? I'm putting you on the spot deliberately.
Sure. Yeah. Really appreciate everything that's been shared by Alex and Nadia about the situation. as they shared when this came up, we had already been working with Supervisor Katz's office on bringing something relating to tenant protections forward. And it's a truly heartbreaking and terrifying situation, both for the tenants there and for future tenants in the unincorporated areas of the county. So all I can really say at this point is we're just continuing to try and investigate every legal avenue. If there was something that was not defensible, it would not be in good faith and good interest from us to try to get something passed that just would get thrown out in a court, and the tenants would still be in the same situation that they are now. And so that's kind of the boundary or the quandary that we're in. Doesn't mean that we're giving up, and I don't mean to sound pessimistic about it, because there are lots of different avenues to accomplish the goal of supporting tenants, and that's what we're working on. I know the county too, the legislative committee made the decision to endorse the bill from Senator Durazo at the statewide level, which would include some of these policy options as well. Of course, that's on its own separate state track process as well. So yeah, that's kind of what I can share.
So the Durazo bill, for those who don't know, is SB 567, and it is currently in going through the winnowing process, but in its initial proposal, it had a right to return with temporary relocation funds, and if an election a tenant could make for permanent relocation funds of 6 months of their rent if they elected not to return.
Well, so why don't you, one little piece here that's very important is that you haven't really clarified, Alex, is the actual situation vis-a-vis eviction of these people.
Sure.
Am I wrong in saying there's not actually been a court proceeding instituted yet to evict anybody?
Not on these grounds, no. Not on these grounds. They issued their first notices in March. They're at the earliest a 60-day termination, and then when they caught wind of the relocation ordinance in the county, they reissued notices in April. So the first notices come due 86 tenants next month. 3 of those are employees. I believe it was roughly 60% students, 40% non-students next month. Some 3 Section 8 voucher holders, 11 families with children. And that's coming up next month if they choose to go forward. Were I to share more, I think that they are actually going to, they're still trying to negotiate. So we'll see what actually happens. They don't have permits.
But both you, the legal aid, and the other law firm are able to represent these folks.
I currently represent some of them, and Harrow represents many of them, and I'm certainly capable of templating a response for all of them, since it's actually the same for every single person. So I don't know that I can on this call say that we can represent 86 people next month, but we have the ability to defend in the short term.
And they have not, the Spaces has not actually acquired permits for the renovation they're claiming they want to do. Is that right?
That's correct.
How does that affect the legal situation?
It makes them not wish to go forward until they do, is the indication.
So this could take longer than originally thought, or what? What are you feeling about that?
I think so. Yeah, I think that despite the what they put in. They wrote a letter to the tenants saying that the law did not apply to them, and legal aid wrote a letter back in the newspaper saying it does. If you talk to the lawyers on the phone, they say it's a gray area, and then they say they're not going to go forward until they get permits.
All right, any other questions people probably have? I hope. Put in the chat, Nadia, how people can get in touch with you if they want to be volunteers or do something constructive. That would be, you're the person that they should contact for some guidance on that point. But any of us who have connection with either any of the county soups, I think they need to feel that there's a wide community concern and interest about all this. Okay, so I didn't see, Bill, you want to verbalize what in say what you just put in chat? I didn't quite see.
Yeah, just a very quick question. Alex, you said 3 are employees. What's the distinction? I didn't understand what you meant by that. Of the 50.
The property managers on site.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right, any other points? So I don't know about you, but I feel very, I mean, it's a very upsetting story in Isla Vista and in general, but also, I think I'm not wrong in feeling there's these political openings and possibilities that we've been hearing about in terms of both the city, the Hope Fund idea and the idea of tenant protections being adopted by the county board and by the state legislature. And we haven't, maybe, let's see, is Benjamin still here? Any of the...
Benjamin left momentarily, but I can...
Why don't you say
check
what you understand is going on in the legislature, Catherine, just very briefly. We have a 1:30 definite deadline of ending this, but that would be maybe good news people need to hear. Not good, news they need to hear.
Sure. I don't focus on housing specifically, so do you mind providing a little bit more information about, what in the legislature you're specifically looking to learn about?
Well, I know that Senator Limon has her own bill, which maybe it's still an active bill, right?
SB, I believe it's 584. As I'm sure you're all aware of, it survived suspense file day, and so it should be going to the entire Senate floor for a vote shortly. The bill is still alive, but it's not the we're not expecting it to be completely smooth sailing going through. I understand that this group tends to be a little bit more supportive of our bill than other groups perhaps. And if you're looking for ways to support the bill, I would be happy to connect you with our Capitol staff since they are most knowledgeable in how to push this bill forward. But did you want any other information?
Well, I can just say, I'll summarize it as I understand it, just to be very brief. It's called the Labor Force Housing Bill.
Yeah, I can.
It's drafted with the help of the construction trades unions. It would create a statewide fund that would be distributed locally to build housing for low and middle income working people in communities.
Yes, correct.
And the funding would be based on taxing B&B operation, right?
Yeah, Airbnb, Vrbo, any sort of short-term rental that is not, hotel, motel, bed and breakfast, things like that. So it would put a 15% state, fair assessment on these sort of short-term rental operations all throughout the state.
And the fact that the construction unions are backing, and this was required to be nonprofit housing, not subsidy to develop private.
Right. It has to be either, nonprofit housing or, something like the Santa Barbara Housing Authority, right? So more of a public interest thing. And the labor unions have shown strong support because this sort of housing would have to be built either using, hold on, let me pull up the exact language right here for it would have to be bill would either have to be, union bill or prevailing wage, right? So the labor unions are quite excited about that because it would tap into so much union labor or prevailing wage labor, which they're in support of.
Very good. So the fact that they're involved, I think, helps politically. And,
yeah, certainly. Yeah,
we'll see
unions
where
know how to organize.
Yeah. And they have clout, as we used to say in Chicago. All right.
Yeah,
Any other things people? So one announcement on Thursday at 7 p.m. in the Isla Vista Theater, the Tenants Union is presenting a film. I'm sorry, I don't have the exact title. Maybe someone knows it, but it's
Push.
What?
Push.
Push. And it's a film, a documentary about the global efforts by investment corporations to take over the housing on a global scale. That's my understanding of the film. And this, I think would be, something. We're waking up to this reality, which is a very frightening reality. It's almost like some alien force is entering in a way that is very hard to even identify, let alone know what the effect's going to be. But the effects in our community are already so evident. So I hope this has been helpful to you, giving you your marching orders, if you like to have marching orders, but generally enlightenment, spreading the word is important, and supporting the organizations and being involved in their work would be important as well. Catherine, there are other things being posted on chat, which I hope you will save. Good information up there. I want to thank Rob Fredericks and Diane Black, Alex Entrikin, and of course Nadia for this really informative and I think emotionally, to me, I'm emotionally worked up about what we've been hearing. So I don't want to close it off before there's any other words of wisdom or yes, go ahead, Sarah.
Hi. I'm putting it on the 4th of June at 4 p.m. on Zoom. I'm part of the Poor People's Campaign delegation going to the Moral Poverty Action Congress, and we're having a part 2 of King documentary. And please come, and I will put the information in the chat so we can. So if you want to do this, then you can sign up.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for all your work. All
I
right.
just want to make sure people know that you can buy tickets now to the SBCAN North County Awards dinner. That's going to be on Sunday, June 25th at 3 p.m. at Blosser Urban Garden in Santa Maria. And I put the link to that in the chat. And we do have sliding scale tickets available if anyone would like to attend. And cost is a concern. And yeah, we're honoring 6 different individuals and organizations doing work related to housing and environmental issues and social justice issues up in North County, and it'll be a good time.
And it's always very inspiring to go North County and see the kind of work that's going on up there below a lot of radar that we honor. SBCAN honors every year these people who are inspiring people. So if you have, and it's a nice little drive up there to a nice venue. So, or else just give your money. We need that. Thank you, everybody. And let's all take care of each other. See you again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Sorry, just as an FYI, I put our capital number in the chat, which you can also see on our website if you're curious more about SB 584. Thank you.
Save the chat.